Snow had been falling for 3 hours by the time Marcus Reed decided his marriage was over. Claire stood in their bedroom doorway, watching him pack her things into garbage bags, his movements efficient and cold, as if he'd been rehearsing this moment for months. The heating hadn't worked properly all winter, and she could see her breath in the air between them. 6 years of marriage reduced to what could fit in 4 black plastic bags. The doctor's office had been warm that morning, oppressively so. Claire remembered sweating through her blouse while Dr. Patel delivered the news in that careful, practiced tone physicians reserve for life-altering diagnoses. Secondary infertility, unexplained prognosis poor. The words meant nothing and everything. Marcus had sat beside her in silence, his jaw working, hands flat on his thighs. They'd driven home without speaking. That silence had been worse than any argument. Now he was stuffing her favorite cardigan into a bag, not folding it, just cramming it down. Claire felt something hot rise in her throat. Her voice came out smaller than intended. "We could try again. There are other doctors, other options." Marcus didn't look up. "I've given you 6 years." The sentence landed like a slap. Given, as if her presence in his life had been charity, a gift he was now retracting. Claire's fingers curled against the door frame. The wood was cold and slightly damp. Everything in this apartment was damp. The walls grew mold in the corners that she scrubbed away every weekend, but it always came back. "We took vows." He finally met her eyes. His face held no anger, no emotion at all, which was somehow worse than rage. "You're not holding up your end." Claire's stomach twisted. They'd had this conversation before in smaller ways, through silences and bushdos, and the way he'd stopped reaching for her in bed 2 years ago. But hearing it, stated plainly, reduced to a transaction with terms she'd violated, hollowed her out. "I can't control this." Marcus zipped the first bag closed. "I want children, Claire. Real children. A family. You can't give me that." The word real hung in the air like smoke. Real children. As opposed to what the imaginary ones they tried for the ghosts that haunted their calendar cycle after cycle of hope and disappointment. Claire had spent 6 years tracking her body like a science experiment, thermometers and ovulation strips, and scheduled intimacy that felt mechanical and joyless. She'd done everything right, followed every protocol, prayed to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. And still nothing. Marcus grabbed the second bag and started filling it. "My lawyer already drafted the papers. You just need to sign." The practical arrangement of it stunned her more than the decision itself. He'd prepared, consulted a lawyer, filed paperwork, all while she'd been researching fertility clinics and saving articles about adoption. She'd been planning their future while he'd been planning his exit. "Where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged, and the casual gesture felt cruel. "That's not my problem anymore." The envelope sat on the dresser, thick and official-looking. Claire picked it up with shaking hands. The weight of it surprised her. How many pages did it take to dissolve 6 years? She opened it and scanned the first page. Irreconcilable differences. The phrase was almost laughable. Their differences were perfectly reconcilable. She just needed her body to cooperate, needed biology to bend in her favor, needed one miracle in a life that had offered her none. Marcus finished packing. 4 bags sat by the door, her entire existence compressed and ready for disposal. He hadn't even left her the suitcases. Those were his, apparently. Part of the life she wasn't entitled to anymore. "The building manager knows you're leaving. I already paid through the month." Claire stared at him. "It's the 6th. That gives you 3 weeks to figure something out." The math didn't work. 3 weeks to find an apartment with no savings of her own, no references. She'd quit her undergraduate program when they married at his suggestion. He'd made enough for both of them, he'd said. She should focus on building their home, preparing for the family they'd have to him. She'd believed him because she'd wanted to, because the alternative was admitting she'd made a terrible mistake at 22 years old. Now she was 28 with an incomplete degree and a resume gap she couldn't explain. Who would hire her? What could she even do? The panic started in her chest and spread outward, numbing her fingers and toes. "Marcus, please." He picked up 2 of the bags. "Sign the papers. Leave them with the building manager. I'll pick them up tomorrow." And then he was walking toward the door, and Claire was following him because she didn't know what else to do. The hallway smelled like cabbage and cigarettes. Mrs. Chen from 3B had her door cracked open, watching. Claire saw the woman's eyes curious and pitying before the door clicked shut. The elevator was broken again, so Marcus took the stairs. Claire stumbled after him, her legs not quite working right. The divorce papers crumpled in her fist. By the time they reached the lobby, snow was falling harder outside, thick flakes that swallowed the streetlights. Marcus dropped the bungs on the sidewalk. "I'll bring the rest down." He went back inside before Claire could respond. She stood there in her thin dress, no coat, watching snow accumulate on the black plastic. A bus drove past its headlights, turning the falling snow into a wall of white. Claire couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. Marcus returned with the remaining bags and set them beside the others. He didn't say goodbye. He just turned and walked back into the building. His shoulders squared, his stride purposeful. A man relieved of a burden. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded final. Claire looked at the bags at her feet. She should pick them up, find somewhere to go. She had friends probably, co-workers from the coffee shop where she'd worked before the marriage. But those relationships had faded over 6 years of declined invitations and canceled plans. Marcus hadn't liked her going out. He'd never forbidden it explicitly, but he'd made his displeasure known in subtle ways. Eventually, it had been easier to stay home. Her phone was at 7% battery. She had $43 in her checking account. The bags were too heavy to carry all at once, and there was nowhere to carry them to. Snow soaked through her thin flats and numbed her feet. A car passed, spraying slush. The bus station was 4 blocks away. Claire knew this because she'd walked past it every day for 2 years on her way to that coffee shop job. It had a roof and benches. It would keep her out of the snow while she figured out her next move. She grabbed 2 bags, the plastic cutting into her palms, and started walking. The city felt abandoned. Snow erased the usual urban noise, creating a muffled silence that made Claire's footsteps sound too loud. By the time she reached the bus station, her hands were purple, and she couldn't feel her feet anymore. She dropped the bags on a bench and collapsed beside them. Her breath came in sharp gasps that hurt her lungs. She should go back for the other bags. She should call someone. She should do something other than sit here watching snow fall through the open sides of the shelter. But her body wouldn't respond to her mind's commands. She was too cold and too tired and too empty. Claire pulled the divorce papers from where she'd shoved them in the waistband of her dress. The pages were damp now, ink starting to run in places. She smoothed them across her lap and read through the terms. Marcus got the apartment, the car, the furniture they'd bought together. She got nothing except her personal belongings and the dissolution of their shared life. There was a line at the bottom for her signature. He'd already signed his name in neat, precise letters. A pen materialized in her hand, though she didn't remember taking it from her purse. Claire stared at that signature line. Signing meant accepting that she'd failed, that her body's inability to perform one basic biological function made her worthless, that 6 years of trying and hoping and enduring had been for nothing, that Marcus was right to throw her away like garbage. She signed. The pen barely worked in the cold, scratching across the damp paper, but her name appeared in shaky letters. Claire Reed, though that wouldn't be her name much longer. She'd go back to being Claire Mitchell, the girl who dropped out of college to marry a man who seemed stable and kind. That girl felt like someone else entirely, a stranger whose choices had led to this bench in this snowstorm. The papers slipped from her numb fingers and landed on the concrete. Claire didn't pick them up. Let them blow away. Let the snow bury them. Let this entire day disappear like it had never happened. Time passed. Claire wasn't sure how much. The cold had moved beyond pain into a strange numbness that felt almost comfortable. She could sleep here, just close her eyes and let the snow cover her like a blanket. The thought didn't frighten her the way it should have. Instead, it felt peaceful, like permission to stop fighting. Headlights cut through the snow. A dark SUV pulled into the bus station's small parking area. Claire watched without interest as the driver's door opened and a man got out. He wore a nice coat and moved with the careful deliberation of someone trying not to slip on ice. 3 children climbed out after him, bundled in winter gear. The man glanced toward the shelter and stopped. Even from this distance, Claire could see him notice her. She waited for him to look away, to hurry his children past the unfortunate woman, taking up space where normal people waited for buses. People always looked away. Instead, he walked toward her. The children followed, their boots crunching in the snow. Claire watched them approach with distant curiosity. The oldest was a boy around 12 with serious eyes. The middle child was a girl with brown hair and braids. The youngest was a boy who couldn't be more than 6. The man stopped a few feet from the bench. His face was weathered, but kind lines around his eyes suggesting he smiled often. Right now, he looked concerned. His gaze moved from Claire's face to her dress to her bare arms to the bags beside her. "Are you waiting for someone?" Claire shook her head. Her voice came out thin and distant like it belonged to someone else. "The bus has stopped running." The man's jaw tightened. "How long have you been out here?" She didn't know. Hours, minutes, time had become elastic and meaningless. Claire looked past him at the children. The youngest was staring at her with wide-eyed disdain. The girl bit her lip. The older boy's expression was carefully neutral. "A while." The smallest boy tugged at the man's coat. His voice was high and clear. "Dad, she's really cold." The man crouched down to Claire's eye level. This close, she could see snowflakes caught in his dark hair and the concern in his eyes. It looked genuine, which made no sense. Strangers didn't care about other strangers, especially not strangers who looked like Claire probably did right now. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" The question was gentle, but it landed like a blow. Claire felt something crack inside her chest. She wanted to lie to preserve some dignity, to pretend she had resources and options and a place in this world. But she was too tired for lies. "No." The middle child stepped closer. Her voice carried conviction beyond her years. "We can't just leave her here." The oldest boy nodded. "Emily's right. It's too cold." The man stood slowly. He looked at his children, then back at Claire. Something shifted in his face, a decision settling into place. When he spoke, his voice carried quiet authority. "I'm Jonathan Reed. These are my kids, Alex, Emily, and Sam." Claire pulled her knees tighter to her chest. The thin fabric of her dress was soaked through. She was shaking so hard now she could barely form words. "Claire." Jonathan took off his coat and held it out. "Put this on." Her throat tightened. "I can't. You'll freeze without it." His tone left no room for argument. "Put it on." Claire took the coat with numb fingers. It was still warm from his body, heavy and substantial. She wrapped it around her shoulders and felt the first real relief from cold in hours. The warmth was so intense it almost hurt. "My car is just across the street." Jonathan gestured toward the SUV. "Come with us. You can warm up at our house, get something to eat. We have a guest room. You can stay the night." The words didn't make sense. People didn't do this. They didn't take strange women home from bus stations. They didn't offer shelter to broken things they found in the snow. Claire had learned this truth over the past 6 hours as neighbors closed their doors and old friends ignored her calls. The world was full of people who looked away. "Why?" Jonathan looked at his children, then back at her. "Because my kids are right. It's too cold." Sam reached out and took Claire's hand. His fingers were small and warm, even through his mittens. "Come on, our house has a fireplace." Something inside Claire cracked wider. Not breaking, just opening enough to let a sliver of warmth through. She stood on shaking legs. The divorce papers fell from her lap onto the bench, but she didn't pick them up. She didn't want them anymore. Didn't want to carry any reminder of what she'd lost or what she'd signed away. Jonathan picked up her bags without being asked. Alex grabbed one when his father struggled with the weight. They moved as a unit toward the SUV, practiced and efficient. Claire followed because she didn't know what else to do. Her body moved on autopilot while her mind struggled to process what was happening. The SUV was warmer than any place Claire had been all day. Alex climbed into the front passenger seat. Emily and Sam scrambled into the middle row, whispering to each other. Claire slid into the back, still wrapped in Jonathan's coat. It smelled like cedar and coffee. Jonathan started the engine and turned the heat up full blast. Warm air rushed from the vents. Claire held her hands in front of them and felt sensation return to her fingers in sharp, painful increments. Her body started cataloging all the small hurts she'd been too numb to notice. Blisters on her heels from the wet shoes, a bruise on her hip where she'd fallen on ice, a headache from crying. The drive took 15 minutes through streets thick with snow. Nobody spoke much. Sam hummed something under his breath, a tune Claire didn't recognize. Emily kept turning around to look at her with curious eyes, but didn't ask questions. Alex sat still and watchful in the front seat, his shoulders tense. The neighborhood grew quieter and more residential as they drove. Houses with lit windows and neat lawns buried under snow. This was where families lived, real families with children and futures. Claire pressed her forehead against the cold window and tried not to think about what Marcus had said. Real children, as if the ones she'd wanted didn't count because they'd never materialize. Jonathan's house sat at the end of a quiet street, 2 stories of red brick with a porch light casting yellow across accumulated snow. Smoke rose from the chimney. Through the front window, Claire could see warm light and what looked like a Christmas tree, though it was only early November. The house looked like something from a catalog, the kind of place Claire used to imagine she'd live in someday. She and Marcus had talked about buying a house once they had kids, somewhere with a weird and good schools. That future had evaporated along with everything else today. Jonathan parked in the driveway and killed the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. He turned to face Claire in the back seat. "The kids need to get ready for bed. You can settle in the guest room and I'll bring you something to eat." Claire nodded because speaking felt impossible. Her throat was too tight, and if she tried to thank him, she might cry. She'd done enough crying for one day. Inside, the house smelled like pine and vanilla. Emily kicked off her boots in the entryway. "Dad's weird about wet floors." Claire slipped out of her ruined flats. Her feet were red and raw. Jonathan hung his keys on a hook by the door and shed his jacket. Without the coat, he looked smaller, tired human. Lines of exhaustion bracketed his mouth. "Go sit by the fire. I'll make coffee." The living room held a stone fireplace with embers still glowing orange. Claire sank onto the couch and held her hands toward the heat. Slowly, painfully feeling returned to her extremities. The pain was intense enough to make her gap, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she was still alive, still present, still capable of sensation. The 3 children settled around her like birds. Sam sat on the floor near her feet. Emily perched on the arm of the couch. Alex stood by the fireplace, his posture protective. They watched her with identical expressions of curiosity tempered by caution. Children who'd learned to be careful around broken things. Sam's voice was gentle. "Why were you at the bus station?" Alex shot him a sharp look. "Don't be nosy." Claire surprised herself by almost smiling. "It's okay." She looked at the boy's open face and decided on a version of the truth that wouldn't burden children with adult pain. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Emily tilted her head. "Like us after Mom died." The room went still. Claire looked up at the girl, then at Alex, then at Sam. Their mother was dead. Jonathan was a widower. These children had lost someone irreplaceable and were still figuring out how to exist in her absence. No wonder they'd recognized abandonment when they saw it. "We didn't have anywhere to go either." Emily continued as if she hadn't just revealed something profound. "Grandma and Grandpa wanted us to move to Arizona, but Dad said no. He said home is where we belong." Jonathan appeared in the doorway holding a mug of coffee. He handed it to Claire without meeting her eyes. His voice was quiet but firm. "Kids, go get ready for bed." 3 variations of protest started simultaneously. Jonathan raised one hand and they stopped. The children scattered their footsteps, thundering on the stairs. Claire heard running water, distant voices, the sounds of a household in motion. She wrapped her hands around the mug and let the heat seep into her palms. Jonathan sat in the chair across from her. He looked older now, worn down by the day or maybe by the accumulated weight of single parenthood. When he met her eyes, Claire saw understanding there. Grief recognized grief. "I'm sorry about Emily. She doesn't always know when to stop talking." Claire took a sip of coffee. It was strong and sweet, exactly what she needed. "It's fine." She paused, then added quietly, "I'm sorry about your wife." Something flickered across Jonathan's face. Pain, maybe, or memory, or both. "It's been 18 months. The way he said it suggested he'd repeated this phrase often, a marker of time that was supposed to mean something but didn't quite. "That's not very long." Jonathan leaned back in the chair. "Long enough to learn how to keep going." The statement held weight. Claire recognized the forced optimism, the way you told yourself you were managing, because the alternative was admitting you were drowning. She'd done the same thing for years, pretending her marriage was fine, that the fertility struggles were just a temporary setback, that Marcus's growing distance was normal. "What happened to you tonight?" The question was direct but not unkind. Claire looked down at the coffee. The mug had a chip on the rim. She ran her thumb over it and considered lying, considered editing the truth into something less pathetic. But Jonathan had offered her shelter when no one else would. He deserved honesty. My husband filed for divorce. He said I was useless because I can't have children. The words came out flat, stripped of emotion. She'd expected them to hurt more, but they just sat in the air like facts, like data points in an equation that no longer mattered. Marcus's opinion of her worth had been dissolving for months. Today just made it official. Jonathan's jaw tightened. That's not true. Claire almost laughed. Which part? All of it. The certainty in his voice caught her off guard. This man didn't know her. They'd shared maybe 10 sentences total. He had no basis for defending her worth, and yet something in his tone suggested he meant it absolutely. You don't know me. Jonathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know you're not useless. He held her gaze. And I know anyone who'd throw someone out in a snowstorm is the one with the problem. Not you. Claire's throat went tight. She nodded because speaking would make her cry, and she'd promised herself no more tears tonight. She'd shed enough in the apartment on the walk to the bus station in the hours of waiting for hypothermia or rescue, whichever came first. The guest room is upstairs. Jonathan stood and added another log to the fire. Second door on the left. There are clean towels in the bathroom. Help yourself to anything you need. Claire set down the coffee mug. I'll leave in the morning. Jonathan turned to face her. You don't have to. She looked up sharply. What? He walked to the fireplace and watched the new log catch. Flames cast shadows across his face. Stay as long as you need to, a few days a week, however long it takes to figure out what comes next. The offer was absurd. You didn't let strangers live in your house indefinitely. There were risks, liabilities, basic safety concerns. Claire could be anyone. She could be dangerous or unstable or planning to rob him blind. Jonathan had children to protect. This made no sense. You don't even know me. The repetition felt necessary, like if she said it enough times he'd realize the foolishness of his generosity. No, Jonathan met her eyes directly. But my kids are watching how I respond to someone in trouble. I want them to learn that you help when you can, that you don't turn away from people who need it. The statement landed with the weight of philosophy, a worldview expressed through action. Claire felt the crack in her chest widen a little more, not breaking, just opening, creating space for something other than pain. Thank you, Jonathan almost smiled. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met us at breakfast. It gets loud. The guest room was small but clean. A double bed with a thick quilt, a dresser, a window that looked out on the backyard. Claire set her garbage bags in the corner and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was firm and smelled faintly of lavender. She could hear the house settling around her. Footsteps overhead, a door closing the furnace kicking on, muffled voices arguing about something trivial. These were the sounds of a living house, a functioning family, so different from the cold silence of the apartment she'd shared with Marcus. Claire pulled off her wet dress and found one of her sweaters in the garbage bags. It was wrinkled but dry. She changed and crawled under the quilt. For the first time in hours, maybe years, she felt something close to safe. Sleep came in fragments. Claire woke periodically, disoriented, forgetting where she was. The bed was unfamiliar. The sounds were wrong. Each time she surfaced from unconsciousness, she had to reassemble the day's events. The divorce, the bus station, Jonathan and his children, the impossible kindness of strangers. Dawn came gradually. Claire woke to light streaming through the window, brighter than seemed possible after last night's storm. She lay still for a long moment, studying the ceiling. The plaster had a water stain in one corner. Someone had tried to paint over it, but the discoloration showed through. A house that looked perfect from the outside but carried hidden damage. Claire understood that intimately. Downstairs, she found controlled chaos. Sam was crying because he couldn't find his library book. Emily was arguing with Alex about whose turn it was to feed the dog. Claire hadn't known they had a dog. Jonathan stood at the stove making pancakes with one hand while packing lunches with the other. He wore rumpled pajama pants and a t-shirt with a coffee stain. His hair stuck up in the back. He looked up when Claire appeared in the doorway. Relief flashed across his face. Coffee's fresh. The kitchen was warmer than the rest of the house. Sunlight poured through windows, illuminating flour dust in the air. A golden retriever slept in the corner near the heat vent. The dog's tail thumped once, but she didn't move. "Can I help?" Jonathan flipped a pancake. "You don't have to." Claire moved toward the stove. "I want to." He handed her the spatula, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "Keep these from burning while I find Sam's book." Claire stepped up to the griddle. The pancakes sizzled. She'd made hundreds of pancakes in her marriage, usually alone on Saturday mornings while Marcus slept in. She'd gotten good at timing them, at knowing when to flip by the bubbles forming on the surface. Emily appeared at her elbow. The girl had braids again, but one was coming loose. "Do you like chocolate chips?" Claire glanced at the bag on the counter. "I do." "Me too," Emily grinned. "Dad never puts enough in." Claire scattered a generous handful across the next pancake. Emily's smile widened and she darted away to report this development to her brothers. Claire felt something shift in her chest, a loosening she hadn't expected. By the time Jonathan returned with the library book, breakfast was on the table. The children ate like they were starving, barely pausing to breathe between bites. Claire sat at the end with her coffee and watched them. This was what a family looked like, messy and loud and full of life. So different from the silent dinners she'd shared with Marcus, both of them chewing mechanically while avoiding eye contact. After the kids left for school, Jonathan cleared the dishes while Claire dried. They worked in comfortable silence. The kitchen felt smaller, with just the two of them, more intimate. Claire was aware of his proximity in a way that felt both pleasant and dangerous. "I have to go to the office today." Jonathan set a plate in the drying rack. "You're welcome to stay here. Make yourself at home." Claire nodded. "What do you do?" "I run a tech company, software development mostly." That explained the nice house, the easy offer of help. He had resources to spare. Claire wondered what he thought of her, this woman with nothing who'd appeared on a bus station bench like discarded furniture. "What did you do?" Jonathan asked. "Before your marriage?" The question assumed she'd had a life before, that she'd existed as someone other than Marcus's disappointing wife. "I was in college, business degree. I dropped out when I got married." She set a plate in the rack more forcefully than necessary. "My husband said I didn't need to finish. He made enough for both of us." "Do you want to go back?" Claire looked out the window. Snow from last night was melting in the morning sun, creating small rivers in the driveway. "To school. To whatever you left behind." The question opened something in Claire she'd kept carefully closed. Dreams, deferred ambitions, abandoned the person she might have been if she'd made different choices. She'd been good at school. Her professors had thought she had potential. She'd wanted to do something meaningful, build something of her own. Then Marcus had proposed, and she'd let herself believe that marriage and motherhood would be enough. "I don't know what I want anymore." Jonathan dried his hands on a towel. "That's okay. You've got time to figure it out." He left for work an hour later. Claire spent the day exploring the house in small increments. She felt like a trespasser, even though Jonathan had given permission. The living room held framed photos on the mantel. Jonathan Younger standing with a beautiful woman with dark hair and a warm smile. The children at various ages, gap-toothed and sunburned. A wedding photo, Jonathan in a suit, the woman in a simple white dress. Sarah, that must be Sarah. Claire studied the photo, looking for clues about the woman whose absence permeated this house. She looked kind, genuinely happy. Her hand rested on Jonathan's chest and his arm wrapped around her waist. They looked solid, grounded, like people who'd built something real. Claire felt like an imposter. She had no business being here, touching their things, sleeping in their guest room. This was Sarah's house, Sarah's family, Sarah's life. Claire was just passing through a temporary disturbance in their carefully reconstructed equilibrium. She found the laundry room and washed her dress. While it tumbled in the dryer, she made soup from ingredients in the refrigerator, carrots and potatoes and chicken broth. Simple but substantial. Cooking gave her hands something to do while her mind tried to process everything. When the children came home, they found her in the kitchen, stirring soup. Sam's face broke into a smile when he saw her. "You're still here." Claire felt her throat tighten. "I'm still here." Emily dropped her backpack by the door. "Did you make that? I hope you like vegetable soup." "I do." Emily looked at Alex as if this confirmed something they'd discussed. "See, I told you she'd stay." Alex set his backpack down more carefully. He looked at Claire with those serious eyes measuring her somehow. How long are you staying? The question held more weight than seemed appropriate for a 12-year-old. Claire recognized the careful protection in it. Alex was the oldest. He'd stepped into some kind of guardian role after his mother died. He was trying to shield his siblings from more loss. I don't know yet. It was the most honest answer she could give. She didn't know what came next, didn't know where she'd go or what she'd do or how to rebuild a life from rubble. All she knew was that for today, she was here and she'd made soup, and these children seemed glad of her presence. That became the pattern. Days accumulated into a week. Jonathan offered to pay her to help with the household. Claire refused at first. It felt wrong to accept money on top of shelter, but he insisted. He needed someone to manage the chaos, someone to make sure homework got done and lunches got packed, and the house didn't fall apart around them. It wasn't charity, he said. It was a job. Claire accepted because she needed something to hold on to, some framework that made her presence here less about pity and more about contribution. She needed to feel useful after 6 years of being told she wasn't. She fell into rhythm with the family. Mornings were a careful choreography of breakfast and backpack checks and lost items found. After the kids left for school, Claire would clean and do laundry and plan dinner. She'd spend afternoons reading books from Jonathan's shelves or taking walks through the neighborhood. The house became familiar. She learned which floorboards creaked and how to work the temperamental shower, and that the dryer made a clicking sound that meant you needed to clean the lint trap. When the children came home, she'd help with homework and listen to stories about their days. Emily talked constantly, jumping from topic to topic without pause. Alex was quieter, but would occasionally share observations about his classes or his teachers. Sam mostly wanted to be near her, sitting close while he colored or played with his toys. Jonathan came home exhausted most nights. He'd shed his coat and tie and join them for dinner. Claire cooked while he decompressed, and they'd eat together at the long kitchen table. It felt domestic in a way that both comforted and unsettled her. This wasn't her family. She was staff, help, a temporary solution to a permanent problem. But the lines blurred in small ways. Jonathan would catch her eye across the table and smile at something one of the kids said. He'd refill her water glass without being asked. He'd ask her opinion about weekend plans or whether Sam needed new shoes. Small gestures of inclusion that made her feel less like an employee and more like a partner. 10 days after the bus station, Claire woke to Sam standing beside her bed. His face was pale and his eyes were red. I had a nightmare. Claire sat up disoriented. What time is it? I don't know. Can you sit with me? She followed him to his room. It was small and cluttered with toys. Glow-in-the-dark stars covered the ceiling. Sam climbed back into bed, and Claire sat on the edge. He looked tiny under the covers, vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. What did you dream about? Sam's voice was small. Mom, I dreamed she came back, but when I hugged her, she turned into snow and melted. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. This child had lost his mother at 4 years old. He probably barely remembered her. His grief was mixed with confusion about what he'd lost and why. That sounds scary. Sometimes I forget what she looked like. Sam's voice cracked. Alex says that's normal, but it makes me feel bad. Claire reached out and smoothed his hair back from his forehead. You're not forgetting her. You're just growing up. That's what's supposed to happen. Does your mom ever turn into snow? The question was so earnest, Claire almost laughed. No, but I understand having dreams that scare you. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm glad you're here. Something in Claire's chest cracked wider. She sat with him until his breathing evened out and his eyes closed. Then she sat a while longer, watching this child sleep, feeling protective of someone else's son. When she returned to her room, Jonathan was standing in the hallway. He wore pajama pants and a t-shirt. His hair was messy from sleep. Thank you. His voice was rough and quiet. He won't usually let anyone but me sit with him. Claire hugged her arms around herself. He had a nightmare about his mom. Jonathan's expression shifted. Pain flashed across his face there and gone. He has those sometimes. They're getting less frequent. They stood in the dark hallway, not quite looking at each other. Claire was aware she was wearing only an old t-shirt and underwear. She should go back to her room, but moving felt impossible. Sarah died in a car accident. Jonathan spoke to the wall rather than to Claire. Someone ran a red light. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. The kids were at school. I had to pick them up and tell them their mother wasn't coming home. Claire's throat went tight. I can't imagine. I hope you never have to. Jonathan finally looked at her. You're good with them. The kids. They respond to you in ways they haven't with anyone since Sarah. They're good kids. They are. But they're still grieving. We all are. He paused. It helps having you here. You should know that. Claire didn't know what to say. The weight of his trust felt enormous. She was not equipped for this. She was the woman who'd failed at the one thing society told her mattered most, who couldn't give her husband children, who'd been thrown away like garbage. What business did she have trying to help these grieving children? But Sam had asked her to sit with him. Emily sought her out after school. Even Alex had started leaving his door open when he did homework, like he wanted her nearby. They were letting her in somehow, creating space for her in their fractured family. I'm not her. The words came out sharper than Claire intended. I can't replace what they lost. Jonathan stepped closer. I'm not asking you to. Neither are they. His voice was gentle. You're just you. That's enough. 3 weeks after the bus station, Jonathan called a family meeting. The children gathered in the living room with varying degrees of curiosity. Claire started to leave, but Jonathan stopped her. This involves you too. She sat in the chair by the fireplace while Jonathan stood in front of them. He looked nervous in the way she hadn't seen before. His hands moved restlessly, picking up a book and setting it down, adjusting a picture frame that didn't need adjusting. I want to talk about how things are going. He looked at each of his children in turn, with Claire being here. Sam bounced on the couch. I like it. She makes good cookies. Emily rolled her eyes. It's not just about cookies. She helps with everything. Exactly. Jonathan's shoulders relaxed slightly. The kids and I talked and we all agree. We'd like you to stay permanently, Claire, not as temporary help, as part of our household. Claire's throat went tight. Permanently. The word carried implications she wasn't ready to examine. What did permanently mean? A month, a year, forever. She was still technically married to Marcus, even though the divorce papers were signed. She had no job prospects, no savings, no plan for her future. Accepting this offer meant admitting she had nowhere else to go. I don't know what to say. Jonathan moved to the center of the room. I know you're worried about being a burden, so I want to make this official. I'm offering you a real position. Household manager, fair salary, health insurance, everything. You'll be an employee, not a guest. The words hit Claire like cold water. An employee, which meant this wasn't about belonging or family or any of the dangerous things she'd let herself start hoping for. This was a transaction. Services rendered in exchange for compensation. She'd be staff like a nanny or a housekeeper, professional and distant. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to. Jonathan's voice was firm. You've brought something back to this house that we lost. You care about my children. They care about you. And honestly, we function better with you here. Emily bounced on the couch arm. Please say yes. I don't want you to leave. Sam nodded enthusiastically. Even Alex looked hopeful in his careful way. 3 faces watching her, waiting for her to give them permission to need her. Claire felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders. What about you? She looked at Jonathan directly. What do you want? Something flickered in his eyes. I want you to stay. The words carried more weight than their surface meaning. Claire felt it in her chest, that shift from professional to personal. But she couldn't read his expression clearly enough to know if she was imagining the subtext. Okay, the word came out quietly. I'll stay. Sam cheered. Emily grinned and hugged Alex, who smiled, small but genuine. Jonathan held Claire's gaze for a moment longer than necessary before looking away and starting to talk about logistics. Salary numbers, benefits, setting up direct deposit. Claire barely heard him. She was too busy trying to understand the warmth spreading through her chest, the feeling that maybe she'd found something worth holding on to. That night, Jonathan stopped by her room with paperwork, contract details, tax forms, official documentation of her employment. He set the folder on the small desk by the window. I want everything legal. His voice was businesslike, professional. So there's no question. You're not a guest. You're not doing us a favor. This is your home, and you're entitled to everything that comes with it. Claire picked up the contract. The salary he'd written down was generous, more than generous. She'd made minimum wage at the coffee shop and nothing at all during her marriage. This was more money than she'd ever had access to. This is too much. Jonathan leaned against the doorframe. It's market rate for someone managing a household and 3 kids. Don't undersell yourself, Claire. She looked up at him. The light from her desk lamp cast shadows across his face. He looked tired but resolute. Why are you doing this? Because you deserve stability. He met her eyes. Because you are good at this. Because my kids are happier than they've been in 18 months. He paused. Because you deserve to feel secure. Claire's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. She'd done enough crying. This was supposed to be a good thing. A job offer, security, a path forward. But it felt like so much more than that. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Jonathan straightened. Just stay. After he left, Claire read through the entire contract twice. Everything was spelled out clearly. Expectations, compensation benefits, time off. It was professional and thorough and completely legitimate. But underneath the formality, she could read what he wasn't saying. I need you here. Please don't leave. We're better with you than without you. This family is broken, and you help us pretend we're whole. Claire signed the contract with a pen she found in the desk drawer. Her signature looked more confident than she felt. Claire Mitchell, soon to be Mitchell again officially, when the divorce was finalized. This was her name. This was her life now. Household manager for the Reed family. It wasn't what she'd imagined at 18 or 22 or even last month, but it was real and solid and hers. She placed the signed contract back in the folder and set it on the desk where Jonathan would find it in the morning. Then she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The water stain looked different in the dark, less like damage, and more like a map of somewhere she'd never been. Claire traced its outline with her eyes and let herself imagine staying here not just for weeks or months, but longer. Years, maybe. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like possibility, like the first real future she'd had since the bus station. She'd been cast out of one life and stumbled into another. Nothing about this made sense. But maybe sense was overrated. Maybe sometimes you just had to trust that stranger who stopped in the snow and said, "Come with me." Claire closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. Her last conscious thought was of Sam's face when she'd agreed to stay. Pure joy, uncomplicated and honest. When was the last time anyone had looked at her like that? When had she last felt wanted, not for what she could provide, but simply for existing? In the morning, she'd start her new job. She'd pack lunches and referee arguments and make sure everyone had clean socks. It was domestic and ordinary and nothing like the business degree she'd abandoned. But it was something. It was hers. And for now, that was enough. Word count 9, 134 words. Continuing. The contract sat on Jonathan's desk for 2 days before he transferred it to his file cabinet. Claire saw it there once when she brought him coffee while he worked from home. He'd looked up and smiled, tired but genuine, and thanked her in a way that made her feel seen. She wondered if he'd read her signature multiple times the way she'd read his offer. If he'd felt that same shift from transaction to something more complicated. The shift in their dynamic was subtle but present. Claire was officially employed now, which should have created distance. Instead, it gave them a framework for the growing intimacy that had been building since she arrived. They could have conversations about household needs that slipped into personal territory. They could share space in the kitchen while cooking dinner without it feeling inappropriate. The professional boundaries paradoxically allowed them to get closer while maintaining propriety. Claire learned Jonathan's patterns. He woke at 5:30 every morning and went for a run regardless of weather. He took his coffee black. He worked too much and slept too little. He carried his grief quietly, folding it into corners of his day where his children wouldn't see. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at Sarah's photo on the mantel, his expression unreadable. She didn't intrude on those moments. She'd learned in her marriage that some pain was meant to be private. Instead, she'd busy herself with something else, giving him space to feel whatever he needed to feel. Sometimes he'd emerge from those moments and find her seeking out her company like it steadied him somehow. One evening, they were both in the kitchen after the kids went to bed. Claire was meal planning for the week while Jonathan reviewed documents for work. The silence was comfortable, punctuated only by the scratch of her pen and the rustle of his papers. The dishwasher hummed. The dog snored by the back door. "Can I ask you something?" Jonathan set down his pen. Claire looked up. "Of course." "Do you regret it, your marriage?" The question caught her off guard. They danced around personal topics, but never quite landed on them directly. Claire considered lying, offering some sanitized version that didn't reveal how much she'd lost. "I regret marrying someone who saw me as a means to an end." She set down her own pen. "But I don't regret trying. I wanted it to work. I wanted to be enough." "You are enough," Claire almost smiled. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "Your ex-husband was an idiot for not seeing it. He wanted children. Lots of people want children. That doesn't give them the right to treat their spouse like a defective product." The anger in Jonathan's voice surprised her. It was protective, directed at someone he'd never met on behalf of someone he barely knew. Claire felt something warm settle in her chest. "Did you always want kids?" she asked. Jonathan's expression shifted. "Sarah did. I wanted whatever made her happy. Then we had Alex and everything changed. I couldn't imagine life without him. Then came Emily and Sam." He smiled slightly. "Each one changed me in ways I didn't expect." "Do you want more?" The question hung between them. Jonathan met her eyes and something passed through his expression. Caution maybe, or awareness of the implications. "No," his voice was quiet but certain. "3 is enough. More than enough." Claire nodded and looked back at her meal plan, but the moment stayed with her. "No, 3 is enough." She wondered if he'd said it for her benefit, to relieve pressure she hadn't asked for but probably carried anyway. The next morning, Alex cornered her in the laundry room. He'd been watching her for days with that serious expression, clearly working up to something. Now he stood in the doorway while she folded towels, his posture tense. "Can I ask you something?" Claire set down the towel she was folding. "Sure. Are you going to leave?" The question was direct and vulnerable in a way that made Claire's chest ache. She thought about giving him easy reassurance, promising she'd stay forever, that nothing would change. But Alex deserved honesty. "I'm not planning to leave, but I can't predict the future." "None of us can." Alex's jaw tightened. "Everyone leaves eventually. Mom didn't want to, but she did. And you're only here because Dad's paying you." The implicit question hit Claire hard. Was she here only for money? Would she abandon them the moment something better came along? Alex was trying to protect himself and his siblings from more loss. He was 12 years old and shouldering responsibility no child should carry. Claire sat on the dryer and gestured for Alex to sit beside her. He did reluctantly, his legs swinging without reaching the floor. "Your dad is paying me, yes, that makes this a job. But jobs can be meaningful. They can be about more than just money." She chose her words carefully. "I care about you and your sister and brother. I care about your dad. That's real regardless of the employment contract. But if Dad stopped paying you, you'd leave." "Maybe." Claire didn't want to lie. "But probably not immediately, and definitely not without talking to all of you first." She looked at him directly. "I'm not going to disappear one day, Alex. If I ever need to leave, I promise I'll tell you first. You'll have time to prepare." Alex studied her face, trying to determine if she meant it. Finally, he nodded. "Okay." He left without saying anything else. Claire returned to folding towels, but her hands were shaking. She'd promised something she wasn't sure she could deliver. Life didn't work that way. Sometimes circumstances change without warning. People got sick or died or had opportunities elsewhere. She couldn't guarantee she'd stay forever or even give adequate warning before leaving. But Alex needed that promise. He needed to believe adults could be trusted to show up consistently. So Claire would do everything in her power to honor what she'd said. She'd stay as long as they needed her, as long as she could manage, as long as this arrangement remained healthy for everyone involved. That evening during dinner, Emily talked about tryouts for the school basketball team. She wanted to try out but was nervous about not making it. Jonathan encouraged her, saying he'd be proud regardless of the outcome. But Claire could see the way Emily's eyes flickered to her father, assessing his sincerity, worried about disappointing him. After dinner, Claire pulled Emily aside. "You should try out." Emily bit her lip. "What if I'm not good enough?" "What if you are?" Claire smiled. You won't know unless you try, Nani. And even if you don't make it this year, you'll be better prepared for next year. But Dad will be disappointed. No, he won't. Claire's voice was firm. Your dad loves you whether you make the team or not. He's proud of you for trying. Emily looked unconvinced. Claire understood. Children internalize parental expectations in complicated ways. Emily had lost her mother and didn't want to let her father down. The pressure was invisible but immense. I'll come to tryouts if you want, Claire offered. For moral support. Emily's face brightened. Really? Really, just let me know when and where. 2 days later, Claire sat in a school gymnasium watching Emily run drills with 30 other girls. Jonathan was stuck at work, disappointed to miss it, but unable to reschedule a critical meeting. Claire kept score on her phone so she could report back to him. Emily was good, better than she'd given herself credit for. Quick on her feet, decent ball handling, aggressive but not reckless. When the coach posted the team roster, Emily's name was on it. She ran to Claire with tears in her eyes. The hug was fierce and unexpected. Claire held this child who wasn't hers and felt pride swell in her chest like it was her own daughter who'd succeeded. That night at dinner, Emily talked nonstop about practice schedules and uniforms in their first game. Jonathan kept catching Claire's eye across the table, gratitude evident in his expression. After the kids went to bed, he found her in the kitchen washing dishes. Thank you for going today. It meant a lot to her. Claire rinsed a plate. I wanted to be there. She talks about you at school, apparently. My daughter, Claire, like you're already part of the family. The words lodged somewhere in Claire's chest. My daughter, Claire. Jonathan didn't correct the phrasing, didn't clarify that Claire was staff. He just let it stand. I don't want to overstep. You're not. Jonathan picked up a dish towel. The kids need this. They need someone besides me. Someone who shows up and cares and isn't trying to replace their mother, but also isn't afraid to take up space. I'm terrified of taking up space. The admission slipped out before Claire could stop it. Jonathan set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. Why, Patty? Because this isn't my family. I'm staff. Help. If I get too comfortable, if I start thinking of myself as belonging here, what happens when that's not true anymore? Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and serious. You do belong here, Claire. Maybe that's hard to see right now, but it's true. My kids love you. He stopped, seemed to reconsider what he was about to say. We're better with you here. All of us. Claire felt tears threaten. She turned back to the dishes before he could see. I'm trying to believe that. Keep trying. It'll get easier. The weeks accumulated. Claire settled into the job with increasing confidence. She learned the rhythms of the household, anticipated needs before they arose, created systems that made everyone's lives smoother. She enrolled Sam in swimming lessons and drove Emily to basketball practice and helped Alex study for his first real exams. She also started thinking about her own future beyond this house. The business degree she'd abandoned called to her sometimes. She'd been good at school, had enjoyed the intellectual challenge, but returning felt impossible. She was 28 out of practice, unsure if she could even get readmitted. One afternoon while the kids were at school, Claire called her old university. She explained her situation to an admissions counselor. The woman was kind but realistic. Claire could potentially return, but she'd need to reapply, submit new transcripts, write essays. The process would take months, and there were no guarantees. When Jonathan came home that evening, Claire was staring at the university's website on her laptop. He set his briefcase down and looked over her shoulder. Thinking about going back. Claire closed the laptop. Maybe. I don't know if I can manage it while working here. You could do both. Take online classes. I'd adjust your schedule to make it work. Jonathan, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. He sat across from her. You deserve to finish what you started, to have something that's yours. Claire felt that familiar tightness in her throat. Why do you keep doing this? Doing what? Believing in me, pushing me toward things I'm not sure I can do. Jonathan smiled slightly. Because someone needs to, and because I know you can do them even if you don't yet. That night, Claire started the application process. She filled out forms and requested transcripts and drafted an essay about why she wanted to return. Writing about her interrupted education meant confronting the choices she'd made, the ways she'd diminished herself for a marriage that was doomed from the start. It was painful but also clarifying. She submitted the application on a Tuesday morning while the kids were at school. Then she closed her laptop and went to fold laundry because life continued, regardless of whether universities accepted you back. She'd learned this truth over years of fertility treatments. You couldn't pause your existence while waiting for outcomes beyond your control. You just kept moving forward, putting one foot in front of the other, hoping eventually you'd arrive somewhere worth the journey. 3 weeks before Christmas, Claire's divorce was finalized. The papers arrived in the mail, official and final. She was no longer married to Marcus Reed. She was just Claire Mitchell again, though that name felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow. 6 years dissolved into legal documentation, a marriage reduced to signatures and dates and court-stamped approvals. She'd loved Marcus once, or thought she had. She'd believed in their future together, had tried everything to make it work. And now it was just over, dismissed as irreconcilable differences. Jonathan found her that evening staring at the papers. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her on the couch. The kids were at friends' houses, giving them rare time alone. The house felt too quiet. "Are you okay?" Claire folded the papers and set them aside. "I don't know what I am." "That's allowed." They sat in silence for a while. Claire appreciated that Jonathan didn't try to fix things or offer platitudes about it being for the best. He just existed beside her, steady and present. Eventually she spoke. "I keep thinking about all the time I wasted. 6 years trying to force something that was never going to work. 6 years letting someone tell me I wasn't enough. It wasn't wasted." Jonathan's voice was quiet. "You learned what you don't want, what you won't accept. That's valuable." "It doesn't feel valuable. It feels like failure. Only if you measure success by staying in something that was hurting you." He turned to face her. "Leaving took courage. Starting over takes even more. You're doing the hard thing, Claire." She wanted to believe him, but the weight of failure sat heavy in her chest. She'd failed at marriage, failed at conception, failed at being the person Marcus needed. The divorce papers were just documentation of inadequacy she'd been carrying for years. What if I keep failing? What if I'm just broken in ways that can't be fixed? Jonathan's hand found hers. The touch was warm and grounding. "You're not broken, you're healing. There's a difference, Obabian." Claire looked down at their joined hands. This felt dangerous, crossing some invisible line from employer-employee to something more complicated. But she didn't pull away. His touch steadied her in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. "Thank you." Her voice came out rough. "For everything. The job, the shelter, believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "You don't need to thank me." "I do." Claire met his eyes. "You saved my life that night. I don't know if you realize that. I was giving up, and then you stopped." Jonathan's expression shifted. Grief maybe, or understanding, or some complicated mixture of both. "I know what giving up looks like. I've been there." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Sometimes we need someone to tell us it's not over yet, that there's still reason to keep going." The moment stretched between them, weighted with things neither could quite articulate. Then headlights flashed across the window as a car pulled into the driveway. Kids' voices erupted as Emily's friend's mother dropped her off. The spell broke. Jonathan released Claire's hand and stood to greet his daughter. But the moment stayed with Claire. The warmth of his hand, the certainty in his voice, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. Like she was more than just help. Like maybe she was someone worth saving. That night in her room, Claire reread the divorce papers one final time. Then she folded them carefully and placed them in the back of a drawer. Done. Finished. The legal end of one chapter and the ambiguous beginning of another. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time in 6 years, the uncertainty felt like possibility instead of threat. 2 months slid by before Claire admitted to herself what was happening. She was falling in love with Jonathan Reed, and the realization terrified her more than the divorce had. This wasn't the desperate attachment of someone clinging to her rescuer. This was deeper, more complicated. She noticed the way he laughed at Sam's terrible knock-knock jokes, the patience he showed when Alex struggled with algebra, how he never missed Emily's basketball games even when work demanded his attention. She noticed the quiet competence with which he managed grief in parenthood and a demanding career. She noticed him, and the noticing had transformed into wanting. The wanting manifested in small, treacherous ways. Her pulse quickened when his hand brushed hers, reaching for coffee mugs. She found excuses to stay up after the children slept, drawn to conversations that stretched past midnight about nothing important and everything that mattered. She memorized the sound of his footsteps on the stairs, could distinguish his presence in a room without looking. Her body had become attuned to him in ways that felt both inevitable and catastrophic. Jonathan seemed equally careful, equally aware of the dangerous territory they circled. He'd start to reach for her hand while they watched the kids play in the yard, then pull back. He'd stand too close in the kitchen while she cooked, close enough that she could feel his warmth, then step away like he'd caught himself doing something forbidden. They moved around each other with increasing tension, both pretending the air between them wasn't charged with possibilities neither dared acknowledge. February brought Claire's university acceptance letter. She'd been readmitted for the fall semester with most of her previous credits intact. 20 months of online coursework, and she'd have her degree. The letter sat on her desk for 3 days before she told Jonathan. She didn't know why she hesitated. This was good news. Proof she was rebuilding, moving forward, becoming more than the woman he'd found in a bus station. When she finally showed him the letter, Jonathan pulled her into a hug that lasted several seconds too long to be purely platonic. His arms were solid around her, his chin resting briefly on top of her head. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, rapid and unsteady. When they separated, neither met the other's eyes. Jonathan's voice came out rough. "I'm proud of you." The words settled in Claire's chest alongside all the other things he'd given her. Safety, purpose, the belief that she could be more than her worst failures. She wanted to tell him what it meant having someone celebrate her victories without diminishing them. But the words caught in her throat, tangled with the confession she couldn't make. March arrived with false spring and Jonathan's increasing distraction. He came home later, disappeared into his office for hours, took calls that left him tense and preoccupied. The children noticed but didn't comment. They'd learned their father's moods, knew when to give him space. Claire watched him fracture under some invisible weight and didn't know how to ask what was wrong. The answer came on a Wednesday evening. Jonathan arrived home at 6 unusually early and asked if they could talk. The children were doing homework upstairs. Claire followed him to the living room, her stomach knotting with undefined dread. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the distance between them suddenly a chasm. Jonathan ran his hand through his hair. The gesture was familiar, something he did when stressed. "I got an offer, a major contract, the kind that could triple our revenue." Claire's relief was immediate. "That's incredible." "It is." Jonathan didn't look happy. "But there's a catch. They want me in New York for 6 months, on site, full time." The words rearranged themselves slowly in Claire's mind. 6 months, New York, full time. She understood before he continued, saw the impossible choice spreading out before him like a maze with no exit. "I'd have to relocate, find an apartment, be there Monday through Friday minimum." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "I don't know how to do that and take care of my kids." Claire's mind raced through possibilities, each more complicated than the last. "You could bring them with you. Uproot them from school, from their friends, from the only home they remember, with their mother." Jonathan shook his head. "I can't ask them to do that." "Then turn it down. This opportunity won't come again." Exhaustion saturated his voice. "This is the kind of deal that sets up their future. College fund security, everything I've been working toward." Claire watched him war with himself, watched the impossible mathematics of single parenthood, watched love and duty and ambition collide. She wanted to fix this but didn't know how. Her role here was household manager, not family strategist. Still, the question emerged before she could stop it. "What do you want to do?" Jonathan met her eyes. "I don't know." His voice dropped lower. "What would you do?" The question caught Claire completely off guard. He was asking her opinion like it mattered, like she had a say in his family's future. She could deflect, remind him she was staff, maintain the professional distance they'd been carefully preserving. Instead, she spoke the truth lodged in her chest. "I think your kids need you more than they need money." "They need both." "No," Claire leaned forward. "They need you. Present, alive, not stretched between 2 cities and drowning in stress. But if this is really that important, then find a way to keep everyone together." Jonathan's laugh held no humor. There is no way. Yes, there is. The words emerged before Claire could assess their wisdom. Take all of us with you. Silence expanded between them. Jonathan stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Claire's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. She'd overstepped catastrophically. This wasn't her decision to make. These weren't her children. This wasn't her family, no matter how much she'd started thinking of them that way. Jonathan's voice came out careful. What? Too late to retreat now. Claire pushed forward. Move the whole family to New York. 6 months isn't forever. Kids are resilient. They'll adjust. Her words gained momentum. I can manage the transition. Find schools, set up the new house, keep everything running while you focus on work. Claire, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. She held his gaze. Let me do this. Let me help. Something broke in Jonathan's expression. He crossed the distance between them faster than she expected, reaching for her hand. His palm was warm against hers, his fingers threading through hers with desperate certainty. The touch ignited every nerve ending Claire possessed. Why? Jonathan's voice was barely audible. Why would you do this? Because I love you, because I love your children. Because the thought of being apart from any of you makes my chest ache. Because somewhere between the bus station and now, I stopped being grateful and started belonging. The truth crowded Claire's throat, but she couldn't say it. Not when their relationship had clear professional boundaries. Not when she was his employee. Not when the power imbalance made any confession potentially coercive. Because you did the same for me. Jonathan's thumb brushed across her knuckles. The gesture was tender and devastating. They sat frozen in that moment, hands clasped, the truth of what they felt humming between them like electricity. Claire couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the warmth of his touch and the way he was looking at her like she was something precious. If we do this, Jonathan's voice was rough, we do it right. I find a place big enough for all of us. You get a raise for managing an interstate move. And we sit down with the kids tonight and make sure they're okay with it. Claire nodded because speaking felt impossible. Her hand remained in his, neither willing to break the connection. This was wildly inappropriate. They were employer and employee. But the boundaries they'd maintained so carefully were dissolving, and Claire didn't have the strength to reinforce them. Jonathan pulled her to her feet, still holding her hand. I need to tell you something. Claire's heart stopped. What? These past few months, having you here, watching you with my kids, getting to know you. Jonathan stepped closer. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. Feel what? That I love you. The confession emerged rough, like it had been held back too long. I'm in love with you, Claire, have been for weeks, maybe longer. And I know this complicates everything. I know I'm your employer and that puts you in an impossible position. But I can't go to New York and spend 6 months pretending I don't want this, that I don't want you. The words hit Claire like physical force. She couldn't breathe, couldn't process, could only stare at this man who'd pulled her from the snow and given her a life, and was now offering her something she'd thought she'd never have again. Her voice emerged thin and shaking. Say something. Jonathan's grip on her hand tightened. Please. I love you too. The words tumbled out. I've been trying not to. I've been so scared of ruining this, of losing everything if you didn't feel the same way. But I do. I love you. Jonathan cupped her face with both hands. His palms were warm against her cheeks. He leaned his forehead against hers, and Claire felt every wall she'd built come crashing down. His breath was warm on her lips. The moment stretched taut between them, weighted with months of careful distance, finally collapsing. You're not going to lose anything. Jonathan's voice was fierce. You don't know that. Yes, I do. His hand slid into her hair. Because I'm not letting you go. When he kissed her, Claire felt the last of her defenses shatter. The kiss was gentle but certain, full of accumulated longing and careful restraint, finally released. Her hands found his shoulders, then his neck, pulling him closer. He tasted like coffee and promise. When they finally separated, both were shaking. Claire's voice came out as a whisper. What do we do now? Jonathan smiled real and full. Now we tell the kids we're moving to New York. The children took the news better than expected, or maybe they were just skilled at hiding concern. Sam was excited about seeing the Statue of Liberty. Emily worried about missing basketball season, but seemed willing to try. Alex asked practical questions about schools and logistics. But after dinner, after everyone supposedly went to bed, Claire heard footsteps outside her door. The knock was soft. "Come in." Alex stood in the doorway in his pajamas. He looked older, suddenly carrying weight that didn't belong on 12-year-old shoulders. "Can I ask you something?" Claire set aside the book she'd been failing to read. "Of course, Farabayan." The boy crossed to her bed and sat on the edge. He didn't look at her, just picked at her quilt with careful fingers. "Are you and Dad together now?" Claire's heart hammered. "What makes you ask that? He looks at you different and you look at him different too." Alex finally met her eyes. "I just want to know if it's real or if you're doing it because he's your boss." The question hit Claire like cold water. She'd been so caught up in her feelings for Jonathan that she hadn't considered how it looked. She was his employee. He paid her salary. The power imbalance was undeniable. To an outside observer, to a child trying to protect his father, this could look like calculation rather than love. "It's real." Claire's voice was steady. "I promise you that." "Okay." Alex stood to leave, then turned back. His expression was fierce. "Just don't hurt him. He's been hurt enough." After he left, Claire sat alone in the dark. Alex's words echoed in her head, mixing with older, crueler ones. "You're useless. You can't give him what he needs. You're just convenient." The voice that had whispered inadequacy through her entire marriage roared back to life. What was she doing? Jonathan was offering her everything, but what could she offer in return? She couldn't give him more children. She couldn't be the partner Sarah had been. She was just a broken woman he had found in a bus station, someone he'd taken pity on. Claire pressed her hands against her face. Jonathan deserved better. His children deserved better. She should leave before she damaged them further, before she became another loss they'd have to grieve. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Jonathan's face, the certainty in his expression when he'd said he loved her. The way he'd looked at her like she was exactly what he'd been searching for. Maybe she was broken. Maybe she couldn't give in everything, but he'd chosen her anyway, knowing all her failures, seeing all her inadequacies. That had to mean something. Claire lay awake until dawn, fighting with herself. By morning, she'd reached an uneasy truce with her doubts. She would go to New York. She would help this family navigate the transition. And she would try desperately not to let her fear of inadequacy destroy the first good thing she'd found in years. The next 2 weeks blurred into logistics. Jonathan found a furnished apartment in Manhattan with enough space for all 5 of them. Claire researched schools and coordinated movers and created spreadsheets for everything. The work gave her hands something to do, while her mind tried to process the seismic shift in her relationship with Jonathan. They hadn't kissed again, hadn't even held hands. The confession hung between them, acknowledged but not yet fully explored. Jonathan seemed to sense Claire's internal warfare, giving her space while making his presence quietly steady. He'd catch her eye across rooms and smile in ways that made her chest ache. He'd brush past her in the kitchen, his hand finding the small of her back briefly before moving away. Small touches that said, "I'm here, I'm waiting, take the time you need." But Claire saw him watching her withdraw, saw concern flicker across his face when she made excuse to avoid being alone with him. She was sabotaging this before it could fully form, and Jonathan was letting her, trusting she'd work through whatever she needed to work through. The day before their flight to New York, Claire found Emily sitting on the fire escape outside her bedroom window. The girl wasn't supposed to be out there. It was dangerous and against building codes. But Emily sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the city lights below. Claire opened the window. "You're not supposed to be out there." Emily didn't move. "I know." Claire climbed through the window and sat beside her. The metal was cold through her jeans. The city stretched out below them, all light and noise and possibility. Emily's face was pale in the streetlight glow. "I miss home." Emily's voice was small. "I miss my basketball team. I miss my friends." Her voice cracked. "I miss Mom, and I feel bad for missing her because you're here and you're nice and I like you, but you're not her." Claire's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to be her." "I know." Emily's eyes were red. "But Dad looks at you the way he used to look at Mom, and it makes me feel like I'm supposed to forget her." The raw honesty in Emily's voice cut through Claire's chest. This child was carrying grief and guilt and confusion about what loyalty meant. She loved her dead mother. She was starting to love Claire. and her 10-year-old brain was trying to reconcile those competing truths. Your dad loved your mom, he still does. That doesn't go away just because he loves me too. Claire reached for Emily's hand. Love isn't a replacement. It's not one or the other. Your heart has room for both. Emily looked at her with tear-filled eyes. Does yours? The question stopped Claire completely. She thought about Sarah, the woman whose office she'd moved into, whose family she'd joined, whose husband she'd fallen in love with. She'd been so careful not to intrude on Sarah's memory, so afraid of being seen as a replacement. But maybe that was the wrong approach entirely. Maybe this wasn't about replacement at all. Yes, Claire's voice was firm. My heart has room for your mom, too. Because she made you. She made your brothers. She made your dad into the man I love. I didn't know her, but I'm grateful for her every single day. Emily leaned against Claire's shoulder. The weight was warm and trusting. I think she would have liked you. Claire wrapped her arm around the girl. I hope so. They sat there until Emily's breathing evened out and her body relaxed. Then they climbed back inside together. Claire helped Emily into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin. The girl looked younger, asleep, vulnerable in ways she tried to hide while awake. Jonathan was standing in the hallway when Claire emerged. He wore pajama pants and his hair was messy from sleep. Thank you. His voice was rough and quiet. She's been struggling, but won't talk to me about it. Claire closed Emily's door gently. She's scared of hurting you, of being disloyal to Sarah by accepting me. God. Jonathan rubbed his face. I never wanted them to feel that way. They're kids. They don't know how to hold complicated feelings yet. Claire's voice was soft. But she'll be okay. We'll all be okay. They stood in the dark hallway, not quite touching. Jonathan's hand moved toward her face, but stopped short. I miss you. The statement made no sense. She was right here, but Claire understood what he meant. He missed the closeness they'd found before her confession. Missed the version of her that didn't flinch away from his touch. Missed the woman who'd let herself want without immediately retreating into fear. I'm scared. The admission slipped out. Of disappointing you. Of not being enough. Of you realizing I'm not worth the disruption I'm causing. Jonathan's hand finally made contact, cupping her cheek. You are worth everything. I need you to believe that. Claire's eyes burned. I'm trying. Keep trying. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. The gesture was tender and chaste and somehow more intimate than their first kiss. I'll wait as long as you need, just don't disappear on me. The next morning they flew to New York. The Manhattan apartment was smaller than it looked in photos. Jonathan had chosen, well, 3 bedrooms, a functional kitchen, windows that caught morning light. But 5 people in 1,200 square feet felt claustrophobic after the spacious house they'd left behind. The first morning, Sam woke crying because he couldn't find the bathroom in the dark. Emily's room faced a brick wall instead of the backyard she was used to. Alex unpacked in silence, his jaw set in that way that meant he was holding back complaints. Claire stood in the kitchen watching Jonathan make coffee in an unfamiliar machine. They moved awkwardly around each other, the domestic choreography they'd perfected disrupted by new geography. Everything felt wrong. The water pressure, the street noise, the way morning light fell through windows at unfamiliar angles. This was a mistake. Claire's voice came out flat. Jonathan looked up sharply. What? Moving here, disrupting their lives. I shouldn't have suggested it. He crossed to her in 3 strides. His hands found her shoulders, grounding her. We're here one day. Give it time. But time revealed deeper problems. The schools Claire had researched online felt hostile in person. Emily's new teacher assigned twice the homework her old one had. Sam got lost trying to find his classroom and spent 20 minutes crying in a bathroom stall before someone found him. Alex came home the first week with a black eye. He wouldn't explain, just shook his head when Jonathan pressed for details. Jonathan's new job consumed him completely. He left before the children woke and returned after they had eaten dinner. Claire held everything together during daylight hours, but nights were harder. The kids were homesick and acting out in ways they never had before. Emily became defiant, arguing about everything. Sam regressed, asking to sleep in Claire's room because the city sound scared him. Alex withdrew entirely, spending hours with headphones on, refusing to engage. Claire felt herself fracturing under the weight of keeping everyone functional. She'd promised Jonathan she could manage this. She'd insisted they uproot the entire family. And now it was falling apart, and she had no idea how to fix it. 3 weeks in, she found Emily on the fire escape again. The girl had discovered it the first day and retreated there whenever things got overwhelming. Claire climbed out and sat beside her without speaking. The city stretched out below them, indifferent to their struggles. I hate it here. Emily's voice was thick with tears. I hate my school. I hate my teacher. I hate that Dad's never home. I hate that you're the only one here, and you're not even my real mom. The words landed like blows. Claire had known this moment would come eventually, the moment when her position in this family got challenged explicitly. She was not their mother. She was staff who'd overstepped, someone pretending to belong somewhere she didn't. You're right. Claire kept her voice steady. I'm not your mom. I'm never going to be. Emily looked at her, surprised by the agreement. But I love you, Claire continued, and I love your brothers, and I love your dad. That's real, even if I'm not your mother, even if this is all temporary. Is it temporary? Emily's voice was small now. Are you going to leave when we go back home? The question revealed the fear underneath the anger. Emily wasn't just homesick. She was terrified of more loss. They'd moved to New York because of Claire's suggestion. If she left, the disruption would have been for nothing. They'd have sacrificed their stability for someone who didn't stay. I don't want to leave. Claire chose her words carefully. But I can't promise forever. Nobody can. All I can promise is that I'm here now, and I'm trying my best. Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned against Claire's shoulder the way she used to back home. The gesture was forgiveness and trust and need all tangled together. Claire wrapped her arm around this child who wasn't hers and felt her chest crack open a little more. The adjustment was glacial. By week 6, Sam had made one friend. Emily's basketball coach turned out to be kind and patient in ways her teacher wasn't. Alex still came home with bruises he wouldn't explain, but he started leaving his door open while doing homework, tacitly accepting Claire's presence in his life again. Jonathan remained a ghost. He worked 70-hour weeks, returning home exhausted and hollow-eyed. Claire tried to connect with him, but he was too depleted for real conversation. They existed in the same space without really seeing each other. The confession they'd made before leaving felt like it had happened to different people in a different lifetime. 2 months in, Claire woke at 3 a.m. to find Jonathan sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. Papers spread before him, his head in his hands. She stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment before speaking. Can't sleep. He looked up, startled. Did I wake you? No, Claire crossed to the table. What's wrong? Jonathan gestured at the papers. Financial projections, contract terms, timelines that extended beyond the original 6 months. They want to extend another 4 months, maybe more. Claire's stomach dropped. What did you tell them? That I'd think about it. He rubbed his face. The kids are miserable. You're holding everything together, but I can see it's killing you. I'm never home. This whole thing is falling apart. So say no. This contract is worth millions, Claire. It's more than financial security. It's setting up their futures, their educations, everything. Claire sat across from him. They don't need millions. They need their father. They need both. The repetition of that phrase from months ago felt hollow now. Jonathan looked at her directly. I need you to be honest with me. Can you do this for 4 more months? Because if you can't, I'll turn it down. But I need to know. The weight of the decision settled on Claire's shoulders. She could say no, could force them to return home to the familiar rhythms and spaces that made sense. But Jonathan would always wonder what he'd sacrificed. The children would know their needs had cost him this opportunity, and Claire would confirm what she'd always feared, that she wasn't strong enough for the hard things. I can do it. The words came out steadier than she felt. But you need to be here more, not all the time. Just present enough that your kids remember what you look like. Jonathan almost smiled. Deal. He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, familiar, despite the weeks of distance. They sat in the dark kitchen, holding hands while the city hummed outside, both too tired for words but needing the connection. Eventually, Jonathan spoke, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry. For what? For bringing you here, for asking too much, for not being what you need. Claire's throat tightened. You are what I need. This is just hard. Hard isn't the same as wrong. Jonathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. The gesture was tender and desperate. I love you. I need you to know that, even when I'm not here, even when everything's chaos. That's constant. I know. Claire's voice cracked. I love you too. They went to bed separately to their separate rooms, maintaining the boundaries they'd established when they moved here. But something had shifted. The acknowledgement of struggle felt like intimacy, like maybe they could survive this after all. Month 4 brought unexpected equilibrium. The children adapted with the resilience Jonathan had predicted. Emily made the school basketball team. Sam's teacher called to praise his improvement. Alex came home one day with a friend, a quiet boy who lived in their building. They played video games in Alex's room for hours, and Claire felt relief so intense it made her dizzy. Jonathan negotiated better hours. He came home for dinner 3 nights a week and took Saturdays off completely. They started exploring the city as a family, museums and parks and pizza places that became favorites. Claire began to see what Jonathan loved about New York: the energy, the density of opportunity, the way you could be anonymous and connected simultaneously. One Saturday in early spring, Jonathan took them to Central Park. The kids ran ahead while Claire and Jonathan walked behind, maintaining careful distance despite wanting to be closer. They'd been in New York 5 months. The original contract was nearly complete. I'm going to turn down the extension. Jonathan's voice was matter of fact. Claire looked at him sharply. What? Why? Because you were right. They need me more than money. We all do. He smiled slightly. And because I miss home, I miss our house. I miss the life we had. Relief flooded through Claire. She'd been holding herself together through force of will, counting down to the end date. Knowing it was coming made everything bearable. When do we leave? 6 weeks. Jonathan stopped walking. The kids were far ahead now, climbing on rocks. But there's something I need to do first. What? He took her hand. This time there was no hesitation, no pulling back. I need to ask you something, and I need you to listen before you answer. Claire's heart hammered. Okay. These past 6 months have been the hardest and best of my life. Hard because everything's been disrupted. Best because I've spent them with you. Jonathan's voice was steady. I love you, Claire. My kids love you. You've become essential to us in ways I can't fully articulate. Jonathan, let me finish. He squeezed her hand. I know you're scared. I know you think you're not enough, that you can't give me children, that you're somehow broken. His voice intensified. But you're wrong. You're everything, and I don't want to spend another day without making sure you know that. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Claire's vision blurred. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. Not when she still felt like an imposter in his life. Marry me, Jonathan's voice was fierce. Not because it's practical, not because the kids need a mother, because I love you and I want to build a life with you. A real life. As partners. As equals. Claire couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could only stare at this man offering her something she'd never thought she'd have again. Marriage meant vulnerability. Meant risking everything. Meant believing she was worth choosing. I can't give you more children. I don't care. Everyone cares eventually. Not me. Jonathan opened the box. The ring was simple and beautiful. I have 3 children who need a mother more than they need siblings. I have a partner who makes me better. That's enough. More than enough. Claire felt tears stream down her face. What if I mess this up? Then we'll figure it out together. Jonathan's voice was absolute. But you have to stop running. Stop waiting for me to realize you're not good enough, because that's never going to happen. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this could work, that she wasn't signing up for another failure, that loving someone wasn't inevitably about disappointing them. Yes, the word came out as a whisper. Yes, I'll marry you. Jonathan slid the ring on her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like promise and relief and coming home. When they separated, the kids were running toward them, alerted by some sibling telepathy that something significant had happened. They crashed into Jonathan and Claire with questions and excitement, and for the first time since moving to New York, Claire felt like they might actually survive this. They married at City Hall 2 weeks later. Claire wore a simple blue dress. Jonathan held her hand like he was afraid she might disappear. The kids stood beside them as witnesses. When the officiant pronounced them married, Sam cheered, and Emily cried, and Alex smiled, small but genuine. Claire Reed. She had a new name again, a new identity built on different foundations than her first marriage. The remaining weeks in New York felt different. They were no longer pretending to be a family. They were one. Claire stopped sleeping in the guest room and moved into Jonathan's space. They fell asleep tangled together and woke to Sam climbing into their bed too early. They fought about dishes and bills and whose turn it was to deal with Emily's attitude. They were messy and imperfect and real. When they finally flew home in early August, it felt like resurrection. The house looked smaller somehow, but welcoming. Claire walked through familiar rooms and felt something settle in her chest. This was home. This was where she belonged. Not because someone had rescued her, but because she'd built something here worth keeping. September brought Claire's first semester of online classes. She took 2 courses while managing the household writing papers at the kitchen table after the kids went to bed. It was harder than she'd expected, balancing school and family and her own needs. But Jonathan supported her fiercely, taking over dinner on nights she had exams and forcing quiet hours when she needed to study. Over the next 2 years, Claire chipped away at her degree. She discovered she was still good at academic work, still capable of critical thinking and analysis. Her professors praised her insights. She made the dean's list, and slowly, carefully, she started to believe she was more than her reproductive failures. The day she got her bachelor's degree, the entire family came to her graduation ceremony. Jonathan sat in the front row with tears in his eyes. The kids made signs with her name. When she walked across that stage, Claire felt vindication so intense it hurt. She'd done this. She'd finished what she started. She was whole and complete, regardless of whether her body could create life. Graduate school followed. Claire specialized in social work, drawn to helping women rebuild after divorce. She interned at a women's center, sat with clients who reminded her of herself, offered hope in the form of practical resources and genuine compassion. Every woman who walked through those doors was Claire on that bus station bench, broken and scared, and unsure if life would ever be good again. She told them what Jonathan had told her. You're not broken. You're just at the beginning of something new. You are enough exactly as you are. The years accumulated. Alex went to college. Sam grew tall and serious like his older brother. Emily became fierce and funny, heading toward college herself. And Claire kept building her career, her marriage, her sense of self. The woman who'd signed divorce papers in the snow felt like someone from another lifetime. That Claire had been so convinced of her worthlessness. This Claire knew better. 7 years after the bus station, Claire stood in a high school auditorium watching Emily prepare to give the valedictorian speech. The girl had grown into someone confident and capable, someone who knew her worth. Jonathan sat beside Claire, his hand warm in hers. Alex had flown in from MIT. Sam sat on Claire's other side, no longer a child, but not quite an adult, somewhere in that uncertain space between. Emily took the podium. She looked poised and assured in her graduation gown. When she spoke, her voice carried across the auditorium with authority. I want to thank my family. Emily's eyes found them in the crowd. My brothers who drove me crazy, but always had my back. My dad who showed me what it means to never give up. Claire's throat tightened. And Claire. Emily said the name with such warmth that Claire's eyes immediately filled. 7 years ago, Claire came into our lives when we were broken. When we didn't know how to be a family anymore. She could have left 100 times. She could have decided we were too much work, too much grief. But she stayed. Jonathan's hand squeezed Claire's. Sam leaned against her shoulder. She loved us when we weren't sure we deserved to be loved. She became my mom not because she had to, but because she chose to. And that choice changed everything. Emily's voice wavered slightly. So this diploma isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who helped me get here. But especially to the woman who taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's hard. Emily looked directly at Claire. Claire, this is for you. The auditorium erupted in applause, but Claire barely heard it. Jonathan pulled her close. Sam hugged her from the other side. Alex reached across and squeezed her shoulder. This family she'd stumbled into, this life she'd built from nothing, had become everything. That night after the celebration dinner, after the guests had gone home, Claire stood in the backyard under the stars. The garden had grown wild over 7 years. She kept meaning to trim it back, but never quite managed. Jonathan found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" Claire leaned into him. "That night, the snow, the bus station, the moment you stopped. Best decision I ever made." She turned in his arms. "I thought I was useless, broken beyond repair." "You were never broken." Jonathan's voice was fierce. "You were just at the beginning." Claire thought about the woman she'd been convinced of her inadequacy, drowning in shame, ready to give up. That woman felt impossibly distant now. Claire had spent 7 years proving her wrong. She'd finished her degree, built a career helping others, raised 3 children who weren't biologically hers but were hers in every way that mattered. She'd married a man who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. She'd built a life, not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd thought she wanted, but one that was real and solid and hers. "I'm glad you stopped." Claire's voice was soft. "I'm glad you said come with me." "So am I." Jonathan kissed her forehead. "So am I." They stood together in the garden they'd built, in the home they'd made, surrounded by the family they'd chosen. Claire had finally found where she belonged, and it was exactly where she'd always been meant to be. Not because a man had rescued her, but because she'd had the courage to accept help, to heal, to believe that maybe she deserved good things after all. The snow from that night 7 years ago had long since melted, but its memory remained a reminder that sometimes the worst moments contain the seeds of transformation. That sometimes you have to fall completely apart before you can rebuild into something stronger. That sometimes strangers become family and lost women find their way home. Claire looked at the house, at the windows glowing warm in the darkness. She heard laughter from inside, Alex and Emily arguing about something, Sam playing music too loud. The sounds of a living house, a functioning family, her family. She'd come so far from that bus station bench, from the woman who'd believed she was worthless, from the girl who'd abandoned her dreams for someone else's vision of who she should be. She'd become someone who knew her value, who helped others find theirs, who understood that worth wasn't measured in reproductive success or perfect domesticity, but in showing up, in trying, in choosing love even when it was hard. Jonathan took her hand, ready to go inside. Claire looked at him, this man who'd seen her at her lowest and decided she was worth saving, who'd given her space to heal and time to grow, who'd loved her not despite her perceived flaws but as a whole person deserving of devotion. "Yeah," she squeezed his hand. "Let's go home." They walked toward the house together, toward the noise and chaos and beautiful mess of family life. Claire had spent years thinking she needed to create life to have value. Now she understood that she'd been creating life all along, just not in the way she'd expected. She'd created a home, a family, a self she could be proud of. And that was more than enough. That was everything.